charming day it has been, Miss Fairfax. Pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I always feel quite certain that they mean something else, and that makes me so nervous. I do mean something else. I thought so. In fact, I am never wrong. And I would like to be allowed to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary absence. I would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I have often had to speak to her about. Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I have admired you more than any girl I have ever met since I met you. Yes, I am quite aware of the fact, and I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been more demonstrative. For me, you have always had an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines, and has reached to the provincial pulpits, I am told. And my ideal has always been to love someone of the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. The moment Algernon first mentioned to me that he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you. You really love me, Gwendolen? Passionately. Darling, I don't know how happy you've made me. My own Earnest. But you don't really mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Ernest. But your name is Ernest. Yes, I know it is, but supposing it was something else, do you mean to say you couldn't love me then? Ah, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation, and like most metaphysical speculations, has very little reference at all to the actual facts of real life as we know them. Personally, darling, to speak quite candidly, I don't much care about the name of Ernest. I don't think the name suits me at all. It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations. Well, really, Gwendolen, I must say that I think there are lots of other much nicer names. I think Jack, for instance, a charming name. Jack? No, there is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces absolutely no vibrations. I have known several Jacks, and they all, without exception, were more than usually plain. Besides, Jack is a notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman who is married to a man called John. She would probably never be allowed to know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. The only really safe name is Ernest. Gwendolen, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once. There is no time to be lost. Married, Mr. Worthing? Well, surely. You know that I love you, and you led me to believe, Miss Fairfax, that you were not absolutely indifferent to me. I adore you, but you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about marriage. The subject has not even been touched upon. Well, may I propose to you now? I think it would be an admirable opportunity, and to spare you any possible disappointment, Mr. Worthing, I think it only fair to tell you, quite frankly beforehand, that I am fully determined to accept you. Gwendolen. Yes, Mr. Worthing, what have you got to say to me? You know what I have got to say to you. Yes, but you don't say it. Gwendolen, will you marry me? Of course I will, darling. How long have you been about it? I am afraid that you have had very little experience in how to propose. My own one. I have never loved anyone in the world but you. Yes, but men often propose for practice. I know my brother Gerald does. All my girlfriends tell me so. What wonderfully blue eyes you have, Ernest. They are quite blue. I hope you will always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present. Pray, let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardrew. Cecily Cardrew? What a very sweet name. Something tells me that we are going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong. How nice of you to like me so much after we have known each other such a comparatively short time. Pray, sit down. I may call you Cecily, may I not? With pleasure. And you will always call me Gwendolen, won't you? If you wish. Then that is all quite settled, is it not? I hope so. Perhaps this may be a favourable opportunity for my mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have never heard of Papa, I suppose? I don't think so. Outside the family circle, Papa, I am glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for a man, and certainly once a man begins to neglect his domestic duties, he becomes painfully effeminate, does he not? And I don't like that. It makes men so very attractive. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. It is part of her system. So, do you mind my looking at you through my glasses? Oh, not at all, Gwendolen. I am very fond of being looked at. You are on a short visit, I suppose? Oh, no, I live here. Really? Your mother, no doubt, or some female relative of advanced years resides here also? Oh, no, I have no mother, nor, in fact, any relations. Indeed? My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me. Your guardian? Yes, I am Mr. Worthing's ward. Oh, is it strange? He never mentioned to me that he had a ward. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I am not sure, however, that the news inspires me with feelings of unmixed delight. I am very fond of you, Cecily. I have liked you ever since I met you. But I am bound to state that now I know that you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing a wish you were, well, a little older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly, pray do, I think that whenever one has anything unpleasant to say, one should always be candid. Well, to speak with perfect candor, Cicely, I wish that you were fully 42, and more than unusually plain for your age. Ernest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honour. Disloyalty would be as impossible to him as deception, but even men of the noblest possible moral character are extremely susceptible to the influence of the physical charms of others. Modern, no less than ancient history, supplies us with most painful examples of what I refer to. If I were not so indeed, history would quite be unreadable. I beg your pardon, Gwendolen, did you say Ernest? Yes. Oh, but it is not Mr. Ernest Worthing who is my guardian. It is his brother, his eldest brother. Ernest never mentioned to me that he had a brother. I am sorry to say they have not been on good terms for a long time. Ah, that accounts for it. And now that I think of it, I have never heard any man mention his brother. The subject seems distasteful to most men. Cecily, you have lifted a load from my mind. I was growing almost anxious. It would have been terrible if any cloud had come over this friendship like ours, would it not? Of course you are quite sure that it is not Mr. Earnest Worthing who is your guardian. Quite sure. In fact, I am going to be his. I beg your pardon. Dearest Gwendolen, there is no reason why I should make a secret of it to you. Our little country newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Ernest Worthing and I are engaged to be married. My darling Cecily, I think there must be some slight error. Mr. Ernest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear in the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest. I'm afraid you must be under some misconception. Ernest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago. It is certainly very curious, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would care to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. One should always have something sensational to read in the train. I am so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is any disappointment to you, but I am afraid I have the prior claim. It would distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolen, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish, but I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he clearly has changed his mind. If the poor fellow had been entrapped in any foolish promise, I shall consider it my duty to rescue him at once, and with a firm hand. Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have gotten into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married. Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On any occasion of this kind, it becomes more than a moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure. Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest into an engagement? How dare you? There is no time for wearing the shadow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade. I am glad to see that I have never been a spade. It is obvious that our social spheres have been wildly different. This ghastly state of things is what you call bunburying, I suppose? Yes, and a perfectly wonderful bunbury it is. The most wonderful bunbury I have ever had in my life. Well, you've no right whatsoever to bunbury here. That is absurd. One has a right to bunbury everywhere one chooses. Every serious bunburyist knows that. Serious bunburyist? Good heavens! Well, one must be serious about something if one wants to have any amusement in life. I happen to be serious about bunburying. What on earth are you serious about? I haven't got the remotest idea. What? About everything, I should fancy. You have such an absolutely trivial nature. Well, the only small satisfaction I have in the whole of this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run around in the country quite so often as you used to do, dear Algy, and a very good thing, too. Your brother is a little off colour, isn't he, dear Jack? You won't be able to disappear to London quite so frequently as your wicked custom was, and not a bad thing either. As for your conduct toward Miss Cardew, I must say that your taking in a sweet, simple, innocent girl like that is quite inexcusable, to say nothing of the fact that she is my ward. I can see no possible defence at all for your deceiving a brilliant, clever, thoroughly experienced young lady like Miss Fairfax, to say nothing of the fact that she is my cousin. I want to be engaged to Gwendolen, that is all. I love her. Well, I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her. There is certainly no chance of your marrying Miss Cardew. I don't think there is much likelihood, Jack, of you and Miss Fairfax being united. Well, that is no business of yours. If it was my business, I wouldn't talk about it. It is very vulgar to talk about one's business. Only people like stockbrokers do that, and then merely at dinner parties. How can you sit there calmly eating muffins when we are in this horrible trouble? I can't make out. You seem to me to be perfectly heartless. Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would probably get on my cuffs. One should always eat muffins quite calmly. It is the only way to eat them. I say it's perfectly heartless you're eating muffins at all, under the circumstances. When I am in trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. Indeed, when I am in really great trouble, and anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse everything except food and drink. At the present moment, I am eating muffins because I am unhappy. Besides, I am particularly fond of muffins. Well, there's no reason why you should eat them all in that greedy way. I wish you would have a tea cake instead. I don't like tea cake. Good heavens, I suppose a man may eat his own muffins in his own garden? But you have just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins. I said it was perfectly heartless of you under the circumstances. That is a very different thing. That may be, but the muffins are the same. Algy, I wish to goodness you would go. You can't possibly ask me to go without having some dinner. It's absurd. I never go without my dinner. No one ever does, except vegetarians and people like that. Besides, I have just made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45 under the name of Earnest. My dear fellow, the sooner you give up that nonsense, the better. I made arrangements this morning with Dr. Chasuble to be christened myself at 5:30, and I naturally will take the name of Earnest. Gwendolen would wish it. We can't both be christened Earnest. It's absurd. Besides, I have a perfect right to be christened if I like. There is no evidence at all that I have ever been christened by anyone. I should think it extremely probable I never was, and so does Dr. Chasuble. It is entirely different in your case. You have been christened already. Yes, but I have not been christened for years. Yes, but you have been christened. That is the important thing. Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. If you are not quite sure about ever having been christened, I must say I think it rather dangerous you're venturing on it now. It might make you very unwell. You can hardly have forgotten that someone very closely connected with you was very nearly carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill. Yes, but you said yourself that a severe chill was not hereditary. It used to be, I know, but I dare say it is now. Science is always making wonderful improvements in things. Oh, that is nonsense. You are hardly talking nonsense. Jack, you are at the muffins again. I wish you wouldn't. There are only 2 left. I told you I was particularly fond of muffins. But I hate tea cake. Why on earth then do you allow tea cake to be served up to your guests? What ideas do you have of hospitality? Algernon, I have already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go? I haven't quite finished my tea yet, and there is still 1 muffin left. Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me who I am? Oh, I am afraid the news I have to give you will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and, consequently, Algernon's elder brother. Algy's elder brother? Then I have a brother after all. I knew I had a brother. I always said I had a brother. Cecily, how could you have ever doubted that I had a brother? Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother. Miss Prism, my unfortunate brother. Gwendolen, my unfortunate brother. Algy, you young scoundrel, you will have to treat me with more respect in the future. You have never behaved to me like a brother in all your life. Well, not till today, old boy, I admit. I did my best. However, though, I was out of practice. My own? But what own are you? What is your Christian name now that you have become someone else? Good heavens, I had quite forgotten that point. Your decision on the subject of my name is irrevocable, I suppose. I never change, except in my affections. What a noble nature you have, Gwendolen. Then the question had better be cleared up at once. Aunt Augusta, a moment. At the time when Miss Prism left me in the handbag, had I been christened already? Every luxury that money could buy, including christening, had been lavished on you by your fond and doting parents. Then I was christened. That is settled. Now, what name was I given? Let me know the worst. Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father. Yes, but what was my father's Christian name? I cannot at the present moment recall what the General's Christian name was, but I have no doubt he had one. He was eccentric, I admit, but only in later years. And that was the result of the Indian climate and marriage and indigestion and other things of that kind. Algy, can you recollect that our father's Christian name was? My dear boy, we were never even on speaking terms. He died before I was a year old. His name would appear in the army lists of the period, I suppose, Aunt Augusta? The General was essentially a man of peace, except in his domestic life. But I would have no doubt his name would appear in any military directory. The army lists of the last 40 years are here. These delightful records should have some of my constant study. Generals Mallam, Maxbow, Magley, what ghastly names they have. Markby, Migsby, Mobbs, Moncrief, Lieutenant 1840, Captain, Lieutenant Colonel, Colonel, General 1869, Christian names, Earnest, John. I always told you, Gwendolen, my name was Earnest, didn't I? Well, it is Earnest after all. I mean, it naturally is Earnest. Yes, I remember now that the General was called Earnest. I knew I had some particular reason for disliking the name. Earnest, my own Earnest. I felt from the first that you could have no other name. Gwendolen, it is a terrible thing for a man to find out suddenly that all his life he has been speaking nothing but the truth. Can you forgive me? I can, for I feel that you are sure to change. My own one. Letitia! Frederick, at last! Cecily, at last. Gwendolen, at last. My nephew, you seem to be displaying signs of triviality. On the contrary, Aunt Augusta, I've now realized for the first time in my life the vital importance of being earnest.